when I look at a cup, me and the cup are not different. So how do you basically, either I'm there or cup is there, how do you reduce this to one entity? And that is my biggest challenge. How do you get rid of this? Even forget the triad, I call even the dual part, even the act of seeing, I can get away with that. But it's the seer and the seeing, how do they merge, or how do they get into one? That part is not very clear. When I dwell on it, I eventually, it goes away. But really, as soon as it comes up over and over and over again, that the duality, or the tri or a tripod, or the tripody, they are really one entity. How do you go? And the corollary of that is, which again haunts many of us, is who is the observer?
If I say, imagine gold or think of gold, what happens? If we have to think of gold, as I said, our thought process or perception through senses can happen only by giving a shape to it. You just can't think of gold in air. You think of it as a nugget, or a lump, or as a necklace, or as a bangle, or as a ring, or as an ear stud. Some shape will always come into our mind. So when we think using the instrument of mind, or when we perceive the things using our five senses, plus mind will always be there behind the senses. The finiteness of this apparatus we are using, that is mind plus senses, the finiteness of the apparatus we are using gets projected onto whatever we are perceiving. So we perceive everything with a shape only. Without shape, we can't perceive at all. That is the limitation of our apparatus, the mind and the senses. With a shape means we are qualifying it or delimiting it with some dimensionalities, either in size or in certain finite qualities which are identifiable or describable, like its luster or reflectivity or weight, density, color. We can have any number of these descriptors, qualities. So any quality specified either in length, width, breadth, dimensions, or existence in time, it is there up to so much time only, or it takes birth now, or it comes into existence, or it appears now. These are all equivalent words. Appearance now, or birth, or coming to existence, or disappearance after a span of time, or death, also limits its existence. So existence limited either in dimensions, it extends to that much length or that much distance, or it exists for so long in terms of time. All these space-time dimensions limit a thing, and these limits are because of the type of apparatus we are using, the mind and the senses. Whenever we think or perceive a thing, we necessarily use this apparatus. So when you look at something, when you imagine something, it will always be a finite thing, and the finite thing will not be an infinite thing. by very definition, a finite thing is a limited entity. So whenever I try to perceive, I will see this finiteness. When I see the finiteness, automatically implies there is a distance between me as an observer and the object which is away from me. So the distance automatically comes into play the moment perception operates. The perception means the involvement of the five senses. If mind alone acts, there is no separation in the space dimension. Separation comes only when the mind is accompanied by the five sensory organs. So mind itself operating alone to perceive or to imagine or to think, only time dimension operates. So mind operates in the time dimension and brings a finiteness whenever it observes something. A thought, it arises now and a thought ends after some time, a few seconds or a fraction of a second. So anything that the mind does or the perceptory sensory organs do is always finite. That finiteness being an indication of separation from me as an observer. So for me to become an observer, in fact, I have to lose my own infiniteness. I have to assume myself temporarily a finite nature of mind. That means I arise as a thought or as a mind. Unless the mind arises, or let me put it this way, unless Brahman arises as mind by ignoring its own infiniteness, by assuming a finiteness for itself, it cannot begin perception. So the moment Brahman starts to perceive, it rises as a little finite entity, as a thought. The current thought is nothing but the mind. And what is that thought? It's some sort of a vibration, a fluctuation. It's something like quantum fluctuation, some of you must be familiar with. Quantum fluctuation doesn't really exist. It's not a measurable fluctuation, but it's there. Like the virtual particles in a vacuum, there is tremendous energy, but it's totally neutral because the particles generate and immediately die. So the fluctuation happens, but it's not really a fluctuation. It's not a measurable, observable fluctuation. So this mind or thought is such a little vibration which comes within consciousness. That means consciousness rises ignoring its own infiniteness as a finite entity in order to observe. So when mind is arising means Brahman or you as Brahman have ignored tentatively your infiniteness or your nirgunatva, attributelessness, and assumed a finiteness for yourselves, and then only you are able to observe. So the moment observation begins, there is already this separation that has been established. And mind arising and working by itself alone will be working as a dream entity or as a dream person. It works only in time dimension. And when it further proceeds and uses the sensory organs, the spatial dimension is also created. Then the space originates. So time comes, then space comes, and the limitations are already imposed onto the observation, and then you perceive an object. In fact, there is no object at all out there. It is the mind which itself projects its limitations on what is. What is that something which we cannot speak about, which has no qualities, which has no dimensions, no taste, no color, no weight, nothing at all to speak about in terms of our understanding, because our understanding is whatever our mind and the sensory perception gives us as the inputs. So mind or the current thought arising as an observer to observe automatically creates a finiteness within itself, and only a, or rather let me put it this way, a finiteness it creates for itself, and a finite observer can only observe finite things. Finite observer by very definition cannot observe infinity. But what is it actually it is observing? It is observing the infinity only. So even as a mind or as a thought, as an observer, is actually observing the infinity, but imposing its own limits, it sees a separate entity, object there. And this is the natural tendency of Brahman itself. It is the natural character. It's not a Vijay or X or Y or Z observing things. It is Brahman himself ignored tentatively his own infiniteness, took the shape of a limited entity, Vijay or whatever it is, and then observed the things. And this observation only with the mind will be like a dream, and the observation using the sensory organs will be like the three-dimensional or four-dimensional space-time world. When Brahman gets tired of this observation, it dissolves this thought process, this mind, and that's your deep sleep state. When there is no mind, Brahman is relaxing in his own beingness. And it doesn't happen only at a 24-hour interval or something like that. It's happening all the time. The thought arises, so the Brahman arises at that moment, and the thought dissolves. You're back as Brahman, and then thought comes up again. So this process is a natural process of Brahman that goes on. It's not that some Brahman entity is somewhere and you are here identified as a separate entity. It's Brahman himself ignoring himself and assuming this finiteness out of that ignorance. Is anything clear, or am I confusing you more?
No. This is very clear. In fact, I would like to
contribute.
Write this down when you propose this, and I think this is a first time very clearing, very crystal clear.
Yeah, you see, you think of Brahman like rain, or yeah, right, like rain. When it is too cold, the rain drops all coalesce and condense into a hailstone, and you will have, instead of water falling, you have hailstones falling. So hailstones, that condensation of rain or Brahman, is what is happening as the mind, and further condensation is what is happening as the world. When knowledge shines on it, like sunlight shining on hailstones and melting them, when knowledge shines, the world disappears and Brahman sees himself only. One of the qualities of Brahmans in terms of our explanations here is that consciousness, knowingness. He has the sensitivity to work as a sensor, as a detector. He goes on observing things, knowing things. So that knowingness is a quality of Brahman himself. It's not something acquired. Knowingness is an alternate name for Brahman. Just like beingness is an alternate name for Brahman. Infiniteness is an alternate name for Brahman. He has to ignore either knowingness or ignore the infiniteness in order to be able to perceive, otherwise perception never happens. Just as I said, if you have to imagine gold in vacuum, you cannot do it. In order to perceive or imagine even what gold is, you have to imagine in certain shapes. By definition, shape means you have delimited it. When you have delimited it, there is a distance of separation between two limits, two edges. So you always see an object. So mind is not really an entity there sitting. It's not a container with lot of thoughts put into it as little fruits put into a fruit basket. Mind is an apparent delimitation of Brahman. So that infiniteness of Brahman is apparently or by imagination delimited. Then it becomes mind. So it's just mind is another name we are giving to Brahman. Another way you can model it is this so-called mind, if you want to imagine it as this self-effulgent, always shining, ever bright lamp, surrounded by a little bit of muck around. So this little bit of muck around is an imagination, is an apparent thing. So mind you can think of as a combination of these two, and this intermixing looks as though the mind, as though Brahman or consciousness is getting entangled with what is observed. So this entanglement happens, and a process of disentanglement also happens. When we say, I understood this, actually the process of thinking and analysis collapses, dissolves into infinity. When our thought process ends, that is the moment, aha, that is the aha moment, that's the understanding. So the thought dissolves itself into infinity, that is understanding, and that is Brahman. So in that infiniteness, there is no more thought there. With no more thought being there, there is no more separation, even a consciousness of a me being present. Is that clear, Vijay?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely clear.
And
yeah.
we will go around the table so that if others would like to say something on this specific point
this specific
or subject. Shall we start with Hildy?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's really good, and I'm trying to frame it the way I see it sometimes is like my consciousness, for example. Sometimes I'm seeing from the consciousness is seeing from this, and then other times the consciousness is seeing from everywhere, not from a position, right? Do you understand what I mean? Like the consciousness is here and seeing everything, including this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then other times it's this, seeing everything else. It seems like everything's being seen from this perspective. So how do you explain that with what you were just saying? So when Brahman, if the consciousness is Brahman, Brahman is seeing everything, but then it moves and sees itself as this.
No, Brahman doesn't see at all.
Okay.
Any seeing has to happen. A thought has to emerge.
Okay.
Brahman emerges as a thought, and Brahman enjoys such a freedom. There are no limits. If he arises as a thought at place X, it doesn't mean he cannot arise anywhere else simultaneously as another thought.
Okay.
Our imagination of spatial separation is valid within our conceptual thinking. For Brahman, he doesn't have any such limitations at all. At one time, it can arise in infinite shapes and infinite places and at infinite times. Because this time-space dimensional concept is an attribute of our mind. We are made like that. Maybe Brahman has evolved as another mind somewhere with 10 dimensions. We never know. It can be even 60 dimensions. Why not? So within the conceptual framework that we have, we think that if it arises at one spot, it cannot arise at another spot. No. Simultaneously, Brahman is arising as so many thoughts, as infinite thoughts, and arising in infinite shapes and infinite sizes. Is that the point you are making? So Brahman by himself is everywhere because it's non-dimensional. It is not delimited by anything at all. So it can make an appearance anywhere and simultaneously at multiple places. So you can imagine hundreds of thoughts arising and observing things and dissolving. For example, you see, you take your own case. 5 minutes ago, you had some thoughts in your mind. Yesterday, you had some other thoughts in your mind. 10 years ago, you had different thoughts in your mind, but you are the same consciousness thinking, right? So when it is happening for the same consciousness or the speck of consciousness within you, to have so many thoughts over a time dimension, by cannot that consciousness has so many different thoughts in our space dimension also. You see the logic? Your same one consciousness, it's not a different Hildy's consciousness in 2005, which has some thoughts. It was not a different Hildy's consciousness, which had some thoughts 5 minutes back. It's the same consciousness, one consciousness. You have no doubt there at all. In time, you are able to see consciousness having different thoughts. So why not that happen in what we call as our space? Because space and time, they are not different at all. What mind thinks is space. What senses think is, what mind thinks is time, and what the senses think is space. That's all the difference. Shall we move on to Naveen? I see him next here.
Okay, so I had only, you mentioned that mind is only about time, huh? Roughly that's what you said, right? It's the space comes in only with the sense perception. Huh?
No, mind by itself alone brings in the time concept.
Yeah, only time concept.
It doesn't bring spatial concept. For example, in your dream, your senses do not work. only mind works during dreams. So where is that happening? There is no space there, right?
Yeah.
It's all happening only in the time dimension.
Yeah,
Space
I think
comes
but then
when,
you also say it is delimitation, no? What I thought you meant it is limitation, no? Time also is limitation, right?
right? No, delimit means to impose the limit.
Another thing I wanted to ask is that when you say that the consciousness is knowledge, ability gathering,
Yeah.
but at the same time, consciousness has already all this knowledge which is there because it is unchangeable. Huh?
No. The sort of knowledge with a lower K to distinguish it, as we talk in terms of our physics, chemistry, astronomy, mathematics, geology, whatever we talk of, this accumulative knowledge has nothing to do with Brahman. This accumulative knowledge, which grows, will also have an end to it. And whatever begins and ends is not Brahman at all. It's a
Yeah.
temporarily assumed character, like the thought. So this accumulative type of knowledge or expertise, that is all within the realm of the mind only and the memory faculty of the mind. So it's not that this encyclopedic knowledge is all consolidated in consciousness. No, the knowledge of consciousness, or to distinguish it, let us say with capital K, the knowledge of consciousness or Brahman is only that sensing capacity, that knowingness. It can know everything and anything. There are no limits to it. If you take a barometer, it knows only pressure. If you take a thermometer, it knows only temperature. If you take yourself, you're a professor of mathematics. You may not know so much about some neurosurgery, right? So these are all limited knowledge in spite of our expertise. Anything that has limits is not Brahman. It is within the concept of the mind itself. Brahman is infinite. Is not infinite doesn't mean it's a large or humongous deposit of knowledge. No, it's always fresh. The accumulated knowledge is always of the past, whereas Brahman as knowledge is always fresh, ever anew. It has no history. It has no memory. So our knowledge functions on the basis of memory, chitta, whereas Brahman's knowledge is ever fresh. It is not based on memory at all. Hope I'm
Yeah,
clear.
but
Yeah.
how do you avoid it? I thought that can be avoided only by having that there is no time concept for Brahma. So everything together is somehow there already. No, in Brahma, though there is no time, so one cannot express it probably.
You are talking about the creation and a created world being entirely there, but we looking at it from yesterday to today to tomorrow. If you see, if you are talking about a created world, it's all there because that creation happened just like that in a moment, and it gets folded back into Brahman again. So that's altogether a different concept, and it's a concept that belongs to our mind, what we think as one model for creation on the world. People predict what will happen in the future. So this so-called prediction is not that it will happen at a time in the future. It all has happened and it is there, and they just have a different perspective. But let us not.
In other words, the present for Brahma is much more than it is infinite. Actually, it is not just present of just now, no, isn't it?
See, the time concept is, as I said, is an attribute of the mind.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
unless
Right.
Brahman rises as a mind, there is no question of time at all. So time happens within Brahman, within consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, but the present for when you say Brahma is always present, that present is different from present what we talk about as today present.
Absolutely. See, the Brahman is always present means it's beingness only. It's just is.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
the present to future to past. No, not that. See, the present which we talk in our world, in our day-to-day life, is a little. It's a sort of a boundary between past and future.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's
No,
not
I
the
agree.
present I'm talking. When Brahman is in the now, present means it's beingness only. That means he doesn't flow through the time dimension. Time, in fact, flows through him. As we discussed in one of our meetings, when you see the infinity, consciousness or infinity, through the prism of mind, it appears as time. When you see infinity through the prism of our senses, it appears as space. So the eternality, eternity or eternality, whichever way you would like to use it, viewed from the confines, from the lens of mind, will give rise to this time factor.
Yeah.
Okay, so we move on to Kalyan. Welcome, Kalyan, by the way.
Yeah,
The
actually,
first time we are
yeah,
happy you have been able to
yeah, yeah,
join
yeah.
us. Yes,
Actually, I want to say that the mind we are talking about is inert. So unless until it is brightened by the consciousness, because when I am dead, I am unable to perceive anything. So the mind needs to be brightened, or it should be lighted. Then only we will be able to transact business with the world. That is one. And in the world, we have only names and forms, as you were mentioning. So the mind should be available first. In the case of deep sleep, you said the mind is not there. But I would say that the mind has gone to a sleep mode. So because when I wake up, it is able to remember everything. It means that it was not absent, in the sense that the mind has got four factors, including chitta, which we say. So the chitta has not gone to emptiness; it is there. But who is that one that brightens that chitta or that mind to hold on when I am alive? Is the consciousness. So that means that we cannot say in deep sleep the mind is not there. The mind is there, but it has gone to a mode where it is not active. Whereas mind has got four factors. It is mind means mind, intellect, chitta, and ahankara, we say, or ego. Ego is not the negative sense; it is I-ness or amness.
Mhm.
So, in which case, the only the mind and the intellect are totally put to rest, so that we are able to enjoy the sleep. If that is not given to us by the Brahman or the Bhagavan, we will not be able to enjoy the deep sleep state at all, which means that the mind is present, but it has gone to the sleep mode. Because when we wake up, the intellect is able to differentiate what I saw yesterday. I'm able to differentiate. All those faculties are retained, so the retention is not gone. But during the deep sleep, only it was put to sleep, put to silent mode.
You see, it all depends upon what model you are handling with, and it also depends on the limitations of language. So, keeping these two factors in mind, you can come up with the sort of model you have where you can say the mind is a separate entity and it folds up when you are in deep sleep and consciousness continues. But where from a separate entity can come? Where from can it come? It has to be Brahman only. Anywhere, everywhere, as per non-duality, Advaita, there is no second entity at all. Anything that arises has to be Brahman only. And if you say mind is not there or mind is there, that means Brahman is there and Brahman is not there. But that cannot happen. Brahman is ever there. So it all depends upon the type of model you are handling. And it's much more parsimonious to think of a three-stage model rather than the turiya, a fourth stage being brought in, permeating all the other three stages. We can get into it on a different date because that itself is a very involved concept. So we can go by your concept also, but there we have to still think of only a particular faculty of the mind reappearing and not appearing and so on. And another difficulty, in that is, see, people who think that I am the same person who is waking up next morning requires the continuity. So what exactly are you saying when I'm continuing to the next day, that I, or that ego in your non-pejorative sense, in the sense of a separate entity, that separate entity is continuing to the next day. That means it has been there also during deep sleep. If it is there without breakage, without any intermittent break, continuously ever there, it is Brahman only. But if it is intermittently arising and disappearing, it cannot be Brahman. But to bring about that continuity aspect, I want to say I am the same person continuing. And therefore I have to bring in this concept of four stages. I discussed this in some articles, but I would like to rather postpone that discussion here, because let us concentrate for the now on the perception aspect only. And now we have next. Shall I move on to Kalyan? You would like to make any further comment?
No, it's okay, sir. It's okay, sir.
Yeah, we'll get into it separately in that analysis of the appearance or disappearance of the mind, and whether mind is totally an inert entity or it is having some core consciousness in it with a layer of inertness around it. These are all models we can discuss. Can you say again?
Maybe it was maybe I understood like this, that the Brahman is taking rest while we are in deep sleep, or deep sleep is a state where Brahman is taking rest. But actually in our dreams we don't see that there is a moment of rest between thoughts. When we see our dreams in the process of in the dream, we don't see that the mind is taking rest between the thoughts. It's just a continuity. In other words, I don't feel like there is a moment of rest between two thoughts happening in a dream state. I mean, within the dream.
Okay, first of all, let us iron out that sleeping and rest. You see, when you say Brahman is an entity who rests, and you are a different entity in deep sleep, obviously we are not talking about Advaita there, because in Advaita there's nothing but only Brahman. Anything and everything has to be a modulation of Brahman only. And Brahman, if he needs rest, that means there is a period of activity for him. So a period of activity varying with a period of rest is something which qualifies Brahman as an object. Brahman is totally inactive. He doesn't act at all. So he doesn't need rest at all. Rest is for somebody who needs energy inputs and energy outputs through action. So Brahman doesn't rest or become active. Brahman is just Brahman. Totally stable, doing nothing. Brahman, as I said, has this natural tendency, naisargika, as Shankara says, to go towards objects and dissolve back. So when he arises as a thought, by itself there is no danger at all. But it doesn't stop there. When the ego forms, the ego will try to claim ownership to some of those thoughts. So it assembles a few thoughts and calls they are mine. And it defines itself as the me with those limited number of thoughts. And whatever is left out, it says it's not me. So the me and not me separation arises. With that arises the ahankara, the ego, and the world which is outside. So I place a mind inside here as a knowing entity, and I place all things that are left out as matter outside my mind. So this differentiation starts coming there with me as a knower and not me as the world or the matter. So this is all a process of creation, and I think we better not mix up again with what we are discussing here. See, so Brahman is not an entity that needs rest, and it's not that a me that rests. See, when people are unable to digest the absence of time factor totally, and they want to feel a continuity of yesterday to today and today to tomorrow. Yesterday night I slept, so tomorrow morning I am the same man waking up. Unless I am unable to give up that continuity of mine as an entity, as an identifiable entity, I don't require this same person being regenerated next morning. I don't require at all. In fact, why next morning? Every moment is a fresh creation and a fresh dissolution. I think it is Vijaranya somewhere he said, you see, every object within this world has three qualities of Brahman and two of the world. The three qualities of Brahman are the infiniteness, the beingness, and the knowingness. And the two qualities of the objective world are, as Kalyan said, the name and form, limitations of size and a label, an identity to it. So even if mind, or even if you take a stone or anything that you can speak of, it has a component of consciousness in it, and it has a component of you see, again, these are models, a component of matter in it. So there is nothing in this world without any component of consciousness. So consciousness is immanent, all pervading. There's nothing without consciousness at all. The so-called inert or matter, whatever we call as material, inert component, is again consciousness only, but more hardened, condensed, as we gave the example of water becoming hailstone. It's water only still, but appears stony, hard. So this so-called matter is consciousness with hardened. That's one model again. You see, nothing has really happened. There is no creation at all. We have to talk in all these terms of fictitious models, just as explanatory artifacts. There is no truth at all in any one of them. Nothing's to be taken as sanctified with respect to any of these models, whether it is three stages of uh, awake, dream, and deep sleep, or four stages, including Turiya. These are all just models to satisfy our the mind at that moment. When understanding comes, you don't need any of these models. I mean, they are all just childish stories, as they say.
One suggestion I had for everybody is, especially Karun and Kalyan Sundaram, there are two documents out there. If any of you, I don't know if you have had chance to look at those documents, which Ramesam has written, elaborate series at Advaita Vision. One of them is a process. I forgot it's a process. Prakriyas, or whatever you want to call it. It's a process document where he goes step by step different models that are out there. And number one is Enigma of Deep Sleep. They deal very extensively with a lot of models that are set. And then eventually the whole idea is to negate these models. But to negate these models, at least to be on the same page, it would be a good idea to go through those. It's very easy reading, very easy, and they're not very long. They're very short documents. So if you don't have them, I'll be more than glad to mail the PDF documents of those two, or even Ramesam. Either way is fine. What do you think of that, Ramesam?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good suggestion. But I forgot to mention one more point that Karun has risen. Is Karun there still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. You are talking about your inability to see the break in the thought process during dream.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, even during this awake stage, there is always a break. In fact, your sensory and nervous system, including the mind, cannot perceive anything at all unless there is a break. So whether it is a thought or your perception, whether it is awake state or dream state, is never a continuous line. There always breaks. In fact, if you are seeing a constant world now through your eye, the brain fills in lots of gaps in the information. In fact, your eye doesn't see a continuous scene at all. It keeps on describing swaths of I forget the number, several thousands in a minute. The eyeball, if you see, if you track, the eyeball constantly moves, but you see a constant world. That's because you are hardwired like that. Otherwise, neither in awake state nor even dream state, anything is continuous. Then about the question of Vijay, one quick addition I would like to make. You see, when you try to merge two objects, it doesn't happen. The oneness is not after things are objectified, because by definition, all objects are limited entities. Limits of distance or limits of any quality will automatically bring in a separation, either in space or in time dimensions. So when Vedantins talk about oneness, they are not talking about oneness of one object coalescing into, the whole world coalescing into a little singularity. That's not the idea there. The oneness is visualized in terms of the knowingness, because if you go into the substance of each of the objects that you see in the world, what are they really made up of? As I mentioned a while ago, is consciousness only. So to be aware of that nature of each of the things that you see, that is that oneness. That you see, everything that you perceive is made up of your perception or your perceiving. What is perceiving? Whether it is through the eye or through the ear or through the skin or whatever sensory organ you use, perceiving is nothing but knowing it. Whether you know it through touch, whether know it through eyesight, whether you know it through your auditory system, you may call it by different names. I have seen a tree, I have heard a sound, I have touched a soft sofa. These are all subsequent stories and descriptions. But you basically what is happening is you are knowing them, whether it is seeing or hearing or touching or smelling, tasting, these are all knowing them. So that knowingness is only one, and that is that Brahman. So the oneness comes not after the objectification. It will never happen. When once I separate myself as a distant observer, I will be a separate observer, and what is observed, the tree or the road or the computer or the image on the computer, they will stay as separate objects. That's why the moment perception arises, the objectified world arises. So perception is creation. Drishti reva srishti. The perception is creation. But cognition, further building stories on that, is a different story altogether.
This point is very, very well made, that the object only arises if you
Perceive it.
perceive it. So the best way is, even if I don't perceive, I still know. But that's what I am. That's where the object disappears and the observer disappears.
So the observer, even though I think I am a separate entity here, it is Brahman itself or himself acting.
Right.
That's
So,
much more important. So I, as a separate entity, I never act. I cannot. I am a totally inert, non-existing entity. I don't exist as a separate person. So how can I act? So whatever is acting, whatever is happening, is all Brahman. So non-perception of objects. That means the world is seen, but you don't keep qualifying the world into little fragments and naming them into little objects. Objects are seen, but you understand the substance of those objects as your own knowingness. That is what is known as liberation, Jivan Mukti. So moksha or salvation or liberation is nothing but seeing this knowingness only in everything that is perceived. So world does not end, that's why. It's a wrong thing to think that the world will disappear when once liberation comes. No, world continues. That's why Sage Vasishtha, what he teaches is, he doesn't say dissolve the world. He talks about creation of the world. He talks about the sustenance of the world, but he talks not the dissolution of the world, but dissolution of your mind. So what can happen is the mind dissolves. When mind is dissolving, mind including the sensory perceptions and all that, the world perception is dissolving. So the world itself is Brahman. See, Brahman is not hiding somewhere behind some hill or in some cave. The world itself is Brahman. When you don't fragment it, identify it, decompose it into little bits of objects. So the totality of the world, as you take it, is Brahman. See here, this is the common man's view of the world, that there is a big universe and there is a Milky Way galaxy within it, or several other galaxies. Then a solar system is a little part of the galaxy where I am. Earth is one of the part of the solar system, and the human body is what I am within that earth, and there is a brain within that body, and the mind is a creature of the brain, and consciousness comes in the mind. But the Vedantic view is just the reverse of it. What all is consciousness only. And a little perturbation. Somehow we cannot explain it at all. So people called it as Maya, means magic. Like a little magic, a fluctuation happens there. The fluctuation really is not an observable fluctuation, like a quantum fluctuation. It's not a classical fluctuation. It happens. So at that moment, ignorance generates, that means consciousness ignores its own infiniteness. And so a bodiless, and this gross physical body will not be there, only mind exists. That entity is already separated because of the mind coming into picture. He is known as Hiranyagarbha. He starts the process of further downstream creation. So Hiranyagarbha then first creates the 5 subtle elements: the earth, fire, air, water, and space. In some creations, space may come first. In some creations, fire may come first. In some creations, earth may come first. By earth, fire, air, don't imagine that these terms signify what you know as earth. Earth signifies there some solidity. Space defines there something which cannot be perceived. Like this, they have got some of their own Vedantic significance. Those 5 subtle elements form. Some Upanishads speak of only 3 subtle elements, not 5. So these are all fictitious stories. So one sage sits down and creates one story. So all these things have to be taken at their face value for temporarily understanding the things. But once you understand, you can just dump them, throw them out of the window. So the 5 subtle elements then mix and match with each other and create 5 gross elements. From these gross elements, mind comes first. Then mind conceives of a physical body. The moment physical body and a separation comes, the world automatically gets created with whatever is not claimed as mine. So mine is the body and not mine is the world. So this is the Vedantic view of the things. So what is much more important is to understand that the oneness does not exist when we talk in terms of objects. Objects and objectification is actually bringing in the fragmentation and diversity. So oneness has to be viewed only in terms of the actual substance by which all things that we call as objects are made up of, and that's Brahman only. That is the oneness that Advaita talks about.
I was going to ask though, so the common part, like if I see a book and you see a book, same book, and both of us think as a book, that is also a creation of the collective mind, and it's not exactly that there is a common book. It's just part of a temporal creation.
Again, here you can have different models. One argument is when we make this sort of a creation, we share a part of those creations, and we keep a part of the creation as our own private entity. That's one model. But another model is, it's not that you see a single object. Even if 5 people are seeing a single object, it does not mean there is a single object. In fact, there are 5 different objects. If 7 billion of us are seeing a world today, it's not that there is one world and 7 billion of us are seeing the same thing. In fact, it is one consciousness looking through 7 billion of us with who have created their own 7 billion worlds. This model is also equally valid. So it's a multiness.
Seems to be more correct. Together with that, also there is a creation of some common that you think of that difference as same.
Again, these are all, explanatory artifacts, and you can feel satisfied with whatever your mind feels comfortable.
Okay, right, yeah.
There are, examples given in Yoga Vasishtha particularly. You see, there was a war between 2 armies, and in the good old days, they used to fight between sunrise and sunset only. As soon as the sun sets, they used to depart to their tents and sleep. So in one of those wars, a big army was there, and so many soldiers had a fierce fight all through the day. And as they relax and sleep in the night, each one of them dreams as if they have a big army in their dreams, and each one of those dream soldiers were killing and winning over the enemy soldiers. Now tell me, what is commonality in the dream of these 100-odd soldiers who have been sleeping and dreaming of the same scene, of the same army? You can see my story? Each soldier has the same dream of a big army of his invading the enemy soldiers and winning the war. So each soldier thinks in his dream they're all commonly fighting and winning the war, but each individual soldier is a different dream, even though they look to the same army, same war, and same sort of success. So the world in the wakeful stage is also like that. It's not that we're all seeing the same world. So this model is also equally valid.
Let me throw another model, which is a very earth-shattering model in the hat here, that there is nobody but me, and everything is my own creation. Ramesam speaking, there is only my creation. There is no separate consciousness, or I'm the only one. Hilly is sitting, I can see her there, but that is my own imagination. Everything is this as a prakriya, as a nididhyas, or something. It is a very powerful one, because then it is very easy to grasp. There is only one consciousness, because personally my main problem was, if I'm liberated, what about my son, my relatives? They're gonna still hang in there, and because of their not knowing, they're gonna suffer, and I'm gonna be going liberated and enjoying the rest of my liberation. That bothered me. So this prakriya, but this is a very earth-shattering prakriya, which could scare you, send you in a different zone. So this is again only a prakriya. This is only a model also, by the way.
Absolutely. See, you imagine that your wakeful world is just a continuation of your last night's dream. When your last night dream apparently ended, all the creatures in that dream also ended. So now this continuation stage 2, stage 1 is the wakeful stage. So the whatever imagined creatures are there within the wakeful stage, they will all go with you, and once you awaken from this whatever we call as our wakeful state. See, in fact, what we call as our wakeful world is said to be the dream world of the creator. But this assumes that the creator is a separate entity than what I am, which is not Advaita. So the creator is also yourself, right? So you have a phase as a creator, that is Brahman, comes down with a little fluctuation as the Hiranyagarbha. You are that Hiranyagarbha. That Hiranyagarbha comes down further with more consolidation and finally arrives at as a physical gross body with a little bit of mind in it. And all this is happening only with that single continuous Brahman only. So it's a different phase. So here if I am sitting as a particular individual, or you are there as an individual, a same Brahman assuming these different phases. So you are the creator of yourself, and you have ignored your infiniteness, your natural, real qualities, and because of that ignorance, which is again your own pretension, your own play acting, you think you are separate, and then it dissolves back again.
So on your illustration, one thing will be very helpful on that. Next to that consciousness, if you put a note, and that is you. When you say consciousness, in your thing you have a consciousness, Hiranyagarbha, and so on, and that consciousness is you. Is if you put a note to that effect, it is not a separate consciousness.
The conscious, you see, that consciousness is I. See, normally what is happening is when I talk of an I, this I signifies this separate identity with my own date of birth, parentage, driver's license, and all that sort of a thing. But if you go deeper into that I and its existence, you find that this limited identity with which you call as I is non-existent. It is nothing but the Brahman himself imagining a little perimeter around itself, or a little perturbation within Brahman. So this perturbation, which is a non-perturbation, which is difficult for us to imagine because it's neither a perturbation nor not a perturbation. So something happens, and that something makes Brahman to ignore its own infiniteness temporarily, and this character, a separate individual, germinates. And it is Brahman himself who will draw it back. You as an individual have no play at all in there. Again, this is again a statement which has to be modified partly. There is a role once a separation happens for this separate entity to come back and join the mainstream of Brahman. One comparison given here is, suppose there is a huge river flowing. Now, a little branch downstream flows, takes a different route. How does it come back and join the main flow again? If that little streamlet doesn't do anything and sits there like a glacier, it will always be sitting there, its own solidification. It doesn't come back and join the mainstream. So in order to come back and join the mainstream, the little stream also may have to retrace its path. So the mind arising as a separate entity can make an effort to dissolve back. And how does this happen? By getting detached with whatever objects it got entangled with. So you slowly disentangle yourself. The faster and faster this disentanglement comes with your effort towards it. But the main thing that is working really is consciousness itself. As I give this comparison very often, the fisherman has thrown the net in the sea from his boat. The fish may be caught in that net. The fish nor the net have any role to play to pull back the net and put it back into the boat. Is the fisherman himself pulls back the net. So these little separate individuals, within them that consciousness part is there. As I said, everything in this world has a consciousness in it. So that consciousness is the one which is speaking. That is the consciousness which is hearing. The other entities, because of their consolidation, congealment, they are insensitive to even listen, understand anything. So that consciousness itself pulls you back again. So in fact, if we are all sitting here and listening to and discussing these things, it's consciousness that has designed it. It's consciousness that's pulling us back. It's, that I like that saying, oh God, it's your love that which makes me to love thee. It's not that I have a love. So the love is itself that consciousness. So consciousness itself pulls back into itself. Thank you.
Actually, sir, I want to say that Turiya is not the fourth stage, if I understand. It is in and through all the three experiences. Because many times there is a confusion that we have to attain Turiya. Turiya is not a stage of attaining. It is in and through all the three experiences.
Absolutely. You see, that means the wakeful stage or dream stage or deep sleep stage, they are modifications of Turiya, right? Is that the way you would like to put it?
Yeah. Because
so that means
I have to attain the Turiya stage. Many times people understand that Turiya I have to attain. You are not going to attain. You are in the Turiya in and through all three experiences. That's what the spiritual.
Yeah, that's why normally I avoid these names. You see, there is also a concept of Turiyatita. Turiyatita also, so they talk about Turiya not only as a stage beyond that also. So these are all artificially brought in. You see, one Upanishad classifies only 3 stages. Some Upanishads take only dream and deep sleep state. They don't consider anything else at all. So these are all, the matters of convenience of the teaching and the way a teacher expresses himself or herself.
That's right.
So there is no sanctity in any of these stories, any of these models. They are useful until you understand them. When once you understand, even Vedas become Avedas. You don't require any of the stuff. So we don't have to, be too much of a stickler for these terms or the models or even the mantras.
Right.
The only glimmer of hope I have of knowing this infinite Brahma, which is, we have shown that there is Nirgun, Nirakar, Nirvikar, and is all powerful. It doesn't see anything. How am I going to grasp that? Because only glimmer of hope I have for that is, it is so easy because it is you. It is me.
It's all Brahman acting. Even if you are speaking, it's Brahman speaking.
And that is very easy for it. This is what I would like you to dwell more on. Because I want that it is not far, it is not something, that is me. That is me, not the small I. A difference between a small I and a large I. Small I, I'm very familiar with because I have been doing this for so many lives, and I know that small I. But that small I is really a big I. How do I get out of this small I and become a big I? That is something we would like you to, from my perspective, like to dwell on more.
Yeah, don't we do some things, some practices, something to do? In fact, no, you have to do something or practice something repeatedly, exercise on a particular model or a method, only if you have to gain something new knowledge, something which you do not already know. To acquire that knowledge, whether it is physics or chemistry or surgery or driving, whatever it is, you have to do these repeated practices to know something which you don't already know in order to gain something. Because all these procedures involve action. Action involves a separate entity actor and a distant objective, something to be achieved, which in turn implies that I don't have that objective right now. I don't have it now. And there is a time dimension involved. And Advaita says there's no time at all. So many wrong assumptions are there. There is some objective which I do not have it now. So I have to possess it. Therefore, I have to take some action which involves effort and time on my part, then I will get it. No, this is something you already are. Only thing is, you just have forgotten, ignored it. So what will help us to remember it back? Groupings like this, satsangachya, discussions like this. They work as aid memoirs. So we have to surrender ourselves by aid memoirs. The more the mind hears and gets involved with the words of Brahman, it gets more and more tenuous, less dense, and gets identified with Brahman. So ultimately, even Upanishads suggest as the only remedy, satsangachya and nididhyasana, meditation. This is all what we have been doing. So there is no other practice or rituals. Rituals will help us to get detached from the worldly attractions. Allurement of the world will get diminished, and a desire to know the truth will grow with all sorts of rituals. But what is to happen? To remember that, we have to be surrounded by these aid memoirs.
What is mind? Is this a compartment basket of 4 different compartments, or is it just a vritti, or is it just one perturbation? These things like that, whatever bothers you in getting towards that liberation part, because all of us here, obviously, it is not just fun. We're really serious about it, that we want to go transcend just the discussions and get into. So we focus on that, and then we can talk about Gita. Another one I had, like Kalyan Sundaram, I have one thing in my mind is Ramesam, essence of Advaita. If you could go through that with Vasishtha Yoga, there is a part which is essence of Advaita, which is one of the most concise way of doing. If we could cover that, that is also on my agenda.
Is it okay if I can share my experience?
Please.
This about my experience in the last days. I was very fascinated when I was reading the Yoga Vasishtha, because in one of the places it says that you also dream about Supreme Brahman in your dreams. And this was exactly happened 2 days before I was reading this. Like I was in a dream, and I was with my friends, and there was a fight within the friends, and I was all of a sudden talking to my friend and asking him, "Who are you? You are not this person. You are a Supreme Brahman." It was in my dreams actually happening this. And this thing was also written in Yoga Vasishtha. When you keep on contemplating on this Supreme Brahman, yes, you may also get dreams where you, within the dreams, you also talk about Supreme Brahman.
Right.
And it was one experience which I was really happy when I was reading that.
Yes, yes. Actually, we have a Sanskrit proverb which is repeated in Vivek Chudamani. A moth constantly imagining that it's a wasp becomes a wasp. Of course, it's a misinterpretation of the life cycle of an insect. But you see, in the cocoon stage, it's so much scared of the wasp, it always imagines so much concentrated attention it pays to the wasp. It becomes wasp. So the more you dwell on Brahman,
Mm-hmm.
the easier and faster you become Brahman. This one of the techniques also suggested in our scriptures. That's what Satsangacha is. Satsangacha has two meanings. That's an association who are pursuing truth. Sat is the truth. So to be associated with Sat, to be with the truth. So Satsangacha is the best and the ideal way to arrive at it. And mind you're raising, that's a very, very interesting question, because you see, not only we have the complexity of the meaning of the mind in Vedanta, we also have the disadvantage of the language. As you said, we have 4 different words in Sanskrit, which are all combined into mind in English. So when we use that word mind, it can mean any of those 4 faculties. It can mean a single thought. It can mean the whole world that is observed. So each time when we use this word, we better have to be careful in defining in what sense we are using it. See, the perception at that specific moment, the totality of it, not decomposed into these 5 sensory divisions, like this is sight, this is sound, the totality of it, including the thoughts at that moment, that itself is the mind. So the world is your mind. And what you are seeing is the mind projected. It's not that objects are there outside you. It's all your own internal projection. So this will bring us back to that model of multiverse, 7 billion of us with 7 billion worlds. And your dream world ends when the consciousness in you just forgets this body and moves on.
Thanks to you.